Hebrews 11:6. He says, but without faith, it is impossible to please him. Well, that would be, that's the point of the whole chapter. The point of the chapter is faith. It's all on faith. So he says, without faith, you can't please him. Well, then that's an important thing to have because we want to please him. He says, without faith, it's impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Now, there's a lot can be said on this verse. I'm not going to tell anybody they're not saved, but I've heard so many testimonies that I think are, I don't know what, where a person says, and I prayed and I just said, God, if there is a God, wait a minute. The verse right here says you must believe that he is. Now, maybe it's just a wording thing, and maybe they're repeating what they've heard and they don't know what to say, but why would you be praying to something you didn't know if there was a something there? Right. Yeah. So that's the most gracious answer I can come up with. You must believe. Now that's the point of it. Numbers chapter 14. Numbers 14, verse 11. Numbers 14:11. The Lord said unto Moses, how long will this people provoke me? That's the opposite of pleasing him. And how long will it be ere they believe me for all the signs which I have shown among them? God says, I went a step farther. They didn't. I didn't have to give them signs, but the signs I did so it would help their belief. And he says, I've been doing these signs and they're still not believing. How long is it going to be? As the children of Israel have, we find they are up close and personal to God interacting with humans. And so God is scratching his head saying, how come they're not getting it? Numbers 20, verse 12. We can point our finger at the congregation, but now we're going to have to turn it around on the leaders. Numbers 20, verse 12. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, because ye believed me not, to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel. Therefore ye shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them. So belief isn't a one-time deal. It's something that grows, it expands, and sometimes you falter in your belief, in your faith. Here, there was a big penalty paid for not believing when they should have. Psalm 78. Psalm 78, verse 20. Psalm 78, 20. Behold, he smote the rock, that's Moses, that the waters gushed out, and the streams overflowed. Can he give bread also? Can he provide flesh for his people? That's the congregation putting words to emotions. You know, that's a dangerous thing. If you get up on the wrong side of the bed, keep your mouth shut. Don't let words come out, because they'll make you say things you wouldn't normally say. You would have more reserve with. Verse 21. Therefore the Lord heard this, as though he didn't hear. He hears everything. But this he was keenly aware of. Hey, they're talking about me. Like when you're in a crowd and you hear somebody say your name, whether they're talking about you or not, you just automatically tune into that name. That's what's going on here. The Lord hearkened and heard this. So a fire was kindled against Jacob, and anger also came up against Israel, because they believed not in God and trusted not in his salvation. Now we're in the faith chapter on faith, and he's gonna pick out the patriarchs and the good guys. But he's not saying that all of Israel is good guys. Here he's killing them off on a regular basis because they don't please him. They don't have the faith. They don't have the belief. Now, true, in the Old Testament it requires works, but it requires more than works. They had to have faith too. They had to believe. Psalm 78, verse 30. They were not estranged from their lust, but while the meat was yet in their mouths, the wrath of God came upon them and slew the fattest of them, and smote down the chosen men of Israel. You would think those were going to be the good guys, the leaders, the ones that were handpicked. But it seems like the leaders had gone the opposite direction with the crowd. 32. For all this, they sinned still and believed not for his wondrous work. He's just demonstrated who he is. One of the things that his power and might are supposed to do is instill fear. And that fear translates into evidence you believe. You're not going to be scared of something that you don't really believe in. But if you really believe there's a booger bear at the door, you're scared to go to the door. And here he's killing them left and right, and they're flippant about it, as though it doesn't matter. So he says, fact is, they don't believe me. Psalm 106, verse 21. Psalm 106, verse 21. They forgot God, their Savior, which had done great things in Egypt. Well, it's been a long time since they were in Egypt. He's saying it was so spectacular and so miraculous that should have stood out in their memory. I know there's a million times when we get to heaven, God's going to point back and say, you thought you were going through a tough time there, but remember all those great things I did back there? It's easy to forget those things, but we got to hold on to those. Verse 22, wondrous works in the land of Ham, and terrible things by the Red Sea. Terrible, full of terror when he destroyed the Egyptians. I'd say that was terrible. Verse 24, yea, they despised the pleasant land. What pleasant land? Walking through the wilderness, you think that was pleasant? God says, wherever I put you, that's pleasant. Because he's there with you. He's leading and guiding you. At his right hand are pleasures forevermore. Therefore, we should be able to say it's pleasant. And the promised land, once they got there, well, it wasn't real what we would call pleasant. They had to kill giants and take over this city and kick out that inhabitant. But God says it was a pleasant land. They believed not his word. So it's his word that assures us wherever we are is pleasant. This is one thing I couldn't quite understand. I was born here, grew up in Memphis, and worked in Rochester, New York. That's where we met. And then, of course, I was allergic to snow, but not really. We moved back down here. We moved back down here and got into Bible school, and I kept hearing these people say how much they couldn't stand Pensacola and couldn't wait to get out. I thought, man, this is a great place. What are you talking about? But I think wherever you are, you should view it as God put you there. It's a pleasant place, wherever it is. Now, when I was in Rochester, it was pleasant most of the time. I just didn't like snow. Now, if I didn't have to drive in it 24/7, I might have had a different opinion of it. Mark chapter 16. Mark 16, verse 17. Mark 16:17. All these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name, they shall cast out devils. They shall speak with new tongues. Obviously, he's speaking to the disciples right there. And it's still a message going to the Jews. It's not until Acts 10 that they go out to the Gentiles. So here he's saying, I'm still going to do signs and wonders to help them believe. And these are the things I'm going to give to those who believe. It's all a belief, belief, belief. You can't drop the requirement of faith in any age. Otherwise, there's no belief. I mean, that's like the world. The world right now believes in nothing. They believe in self. I guess they've decided they're God. Look at it in Revelation 21. Revelation 21, verse 8. Start seeing the categories. I have a little plan of salvation I do for certain books, and I've got one for Revelation. This is one of the verses I use. God has some categories for what qualifies for hell that man wouldn't realize. And here they are. Revelation 21, 8. But the fearful. Ever been afraid? The fearful. The unbelieving. Category number 2. He says in another place, when the Son of Man comes back, is he going to find faith on the earth? Well, it's waning fast. And if it's doing that right now, imagine when the Antichrist is here in person. Yeah, it'll be slim. He says, and then look at the list. We would expect these: abominable, and murderers, and whoremongers, and sorcerers, and idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. They've gone straight to the upgrade, the lake of fire. I point this out to people. He says the unbelieving is in the same list with his other buddies that are whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters. So what's the difference in being unbelieving, being fearful, or being an idolater or a sorcerer? You end up at the same place. Bad news. We've got to believe. That's what our chapter's about. He says, our verse, Hebrews 11, verse 6. Without faith, it's impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and then he's got to go one step farther. And that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Has to be that way. Otherwise, what you have is Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, they believe in gods, but they don't believe there's any hope in it. They're cruel and vindictive. They're not rewarders. If they're going to give you a crop that year, you've got to kill 3 kids, or something like that. That's the type of thing they had. That's not our God. You got to believe him for who he says he is. He's a rewarder. Genesis 15, verse 1. God introducing himself to Abraham here. I like when God introduces himself. He doesn't need somebody else to introduce him. They might say the wrong thing. Genesis 15:1. After these things, the word of the Lord came unto Abraham in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. God is the reward. That's a deal. If you've got him, you got everything. In Ruth chapter 2. Mark it down. I don't go to this book often. Ruth 2. Ruth 2, verse 11. And Boaz answered and said unto her, It hath fully been showed me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law since the death of thy husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother, and the land of thy nativity, and art come unto the people, a people which thou knowest not hitherefore. There's some big words. Verse 12. The Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. Notice the reward and the belief, the trust, are tied right together. He says you deserve to get a reward, a full reward, because you've put feet to your trust, to your faith. And she had. Psalm 58. Psalm 58, verse 10. The righteous shall rejoice when he seeth the vengeance. Now, we got to be careful with this one. You're not really righteous yet. It won't be till we get to heaven and we're like him that we'll have pure, holy righteousness. Ours down here, when we see vengeance, there's usually going to be a mixture of selfishness in it. And you've got to be careful. He says not to rejoice when you see your enemy fall. You'll fall in the ditch too. He says, when he seeth the vengeance, he shall wash his feet in the blood of the wicked, so that a man shall say, Verily, there is a reward for the righteous. Verily, he is a God that judgeth in the earth. That is, God one day is going to set things straight. People expect God to be fair. You talk to them, and that's usually one of the oppositions they have to Christianity is, why did something bad happen to somebody I know that's good? And I said, why do you think they're good? We can go down that road. But the fact is, people just naturally think if there is a God and there is a creator, he has to be just and righteous and fair. He is. It's just not in your lifetime. It'll all pan out one day. Proverbs 11. Proverbs 11, verse 18. The wicked worketh a deceitful work, but to him that soweth righteousness shall be a sure reward. Now there he's giving you a little clue about what it's going to be like in the Christian life. Like farming. You sow. That's a farming term. You plant. He's sowing righteousness. He's probably not going to see a result for a long time until the plant comes into season. And when it comes into season, he's probably going to think, I thought I planted more than that. The bugs must have got him. That's the trudge and the plodding that a Christian has to do. And sowing righteousness. Matthew 5, verse 12. Matthew 5:12. It says, rejoice and be exceeding glad. It sounded like a good start to this verse. For great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Persecution equals a great reward. That's what we would expect. We would say if you suffered a lot for God, you should get a lot, and you will. That's what he's promised. He's a fair God. Matthew 6, verse 1. He says, take heed that you do not your alms before men to be seen of them. Otherwise you have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. This is a tempting thing because we're flesh, is to, the devil's so sneaky. He can give you a spiritual reason to be carnal. The reason that a carnal Christian would have for being seen doing their alms is to be a testimony. And you can be a testimony without pushing it yourself. But he's saying right here, if the whole purpose behind it was just to be seen, there wasn't any point in giving. God don't need it. He says, you've got no reward because you already got it. Verse 2. Matthew 6, verse 2. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. They just got it. They got the pat on the back. They got everybody to look at them and ooh and ah over them. That's not a good thing. I'd rather have the ooh and ah when we get to heaven, and nobody's going to confuse the ooh and the ah for you. It'll be for what Christ did through you. Amen. Look at it in Matthew 10, verse 42. And whosoever shall give to drink unto one of these little ones a cup of water only, in the name of a disciple, verily I say unto you, he shall in no wise lose his reward. So this is a doctrinal thing, and we don't have time to get into it. I'm sure we'll cover it at some point. But he's saying here that there is a reward that can be lost or not lost. This one, he won't lose his reward. That is, the indication is some people are losing rewards. And there's a possibility you could. Here's one you could get that will not be lost. It can't be taken away. That's interesting. Luke 6, verse 35 is a weird verse. I know that people read right over these verses, and I do too sometimes, but I read so slow and have such difficulty with it that I think I pick up on words that other people don't. Luke 6, verse 35. Love ye your enemies and do good. And what's the next word? Lend, hoping for nothing again. Then it wasn't a loan. How do you lend to somebody and hope they don't give you any money back or payment back? Obviously, that person thinks it's a loan, and you give it to them and say, don't pay me back. And your reward shall be great, and ye shall be the children of the highest, for he is kind unto the unthankful and to the evil. And we think of that as being nice, being kind. But if you're a holy, righteous God who cannot stand sin, to be kind to those who are evil, the opposite of him, is quite gracious. Hebrews 6, verse 18. We covered this verse in detail at some point, but I'm just going to pull out one thing. That by two immutable things in the which it was impossible for God to lie, we might have a strong consolation who have fled for refuge to lay hold upon the hope. Now, that's what we have as a Christian, set before us, which hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which entereth into that within the veil. Christians should be even killed, more so than the lost world, because we have something that anchors our soul. Now, an anchor doesn't keep you from moving, it keeps you from leaving. So you might have some ups and downs. I'm not saying you'll never have an up and down. I'm saying in comparison to the lost world who has no anchor, ours should anchor us. And the anchor is the hope we have. He says back to our verse, Hebrews 11, verse 6. Now he says something that seems a little odd for our age. Without faith, it's impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he's rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Okay, in our age, we don't really diligently seek him. He sought us. He says, if I be lifted up from the earth, I'll draw all men to me. Okay, well, right here, he's saying they need to come try to find me. Kind of like the Old Testament was. Look at it in 2 Peter. 2 Peter 1, verse 5. 2 Peter 1, 5. We've been covering the faith chapter, and it seems like faith is the end-all, be-all in this chapter. And that's the way it is. Anytime God reveals one thing to you, you think that's it. You know, that's all there is to it. How could there be more than this? Then it grows. 2 Peter 1, 5. Besides this, giving all diligence, add to your faith. Just having faith wasn't enough. There's going to have to be some diligence involved in it. Virtue, and to virtue knowledge. Look down at verse 8. For if these things be in you and abound, they make you that you shall neither be barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But he that lacketh these things is blind and cannot see afar off, and hath forgotten that he was purged from his old sins. Very different language than church age doctrine. He's saying here, he was purged from his old sins. He doesn't abound in these things, which are works. Therefore, he's blind. That's the definition of the world. That's the job of the devil, is to blind the minds of them that believe not. You got it. 2 Peter 1. 2 Peter 1, verse 10. Wherefore the rather, well, I can't read that fast. Wherefore the rather, brethren, give diligence to make your calling and election sure. For if ye do these things, ye shall never fall. Well, then 90% of Christianity today is out. He says it's a matter of doing. That's works. And things, that's a different age. It's for the tribulation time period. Look at it in 2 Peter 3, verse 14. Wherefore, beloved, seeing that you look for such things. Okay, so that's good. That's faith. That's the hope that they've got before them. Be diligent. What he told us earlier. That you may be found of him in peace, without spot and blameless. Whew. Set the bar pretty high there. Well, that's what he's expecting of them, and that's that diligently seeking him. It's definitely written to a different age than the church age, but we can make applications. Hebrews 11, verse 7. Hebrews 11:7. By faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. This example of Noah here, his faith is placed in the future. He had to be serving God to begin with to qualify for God to tell him about things that were going to happen. So there it's that diligence has already been seen in action. Genesis 6. And the Lord said, did I tell you where I was? Genesis 6:7. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Verse 9. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. He did something odd there. It says he found grace. I didn't found no grace. Grace found me. There's a big difference. In Hebrews, he's talking about being diligent. In Peter, we saw you have to have these works, these things have to be in you and abound. And you find it from the book of Hebrews on, you find all of the works coming back into play. In Genesis 6:8, you find the first time the word grace shows up in the Bible. It's a recognition of righteousness in a person. Now, that's not meaning the person is righteous. It's meaning that God has seen something in them that he says, okay, I like that. I'll just go ahead and say you're righteous. God was doing that all the time in the Old Testament. He was overlooking things and imputing things that they had no right to. Well, we don't have to get jealous about that. He did that with us when we got saved. We had no right to that. We did not earn that. He just said, if you're willing to obey this part of it, I'll just give you all the rest of it. In the Old Testament, somebody finds grace. In the New Testament, the sinner is found by grace. Big difference. Ephesians 2:8-9, everybody knows this. For by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God. I didn't have to go find it. He gave it to me. Not of works, lest any man should boast. The Old Testament people had to go work it up. They had to go find it. Exodus 33, now that you're already way in the New Testament. Exodus 33:12. And Moses said unto the Lord, see, thou say unto me, bring up this people, and thou hast not let me know whom thou wilt send with me. Yet thou hast said, I know thee by name, and thou hast also found grace in my sight. God has already told this to Moses. Moses is repeating something he already knows from God. He says, God, you've told me I found this grace. I've been looking for it. You told me I found it. Verse 13, now therefore, I pray that if I have found grace in thy sight, show me now thy way, that I may know thee, and that I may find grace in thy sight. Thought he just found it. This is the thing about the Old Testament, is they're not really sure if they got it. If they got all of it. Did they lose it somewhere? And it'll be the same in the tribulation. And consider that this nation is thy people. And he said, my presence shall go with thee, and I will give thee rest. Now that's a evidence that you have grace from God, is that his presence is with you and that you get rest. You know, God's people are supposed to get rest. It doesn't mean the same amount. I think I get about 30 hours of sleep a night, and I really don't. I get about 3. But you should be rested. God gives his beloved rest. He does this. A pill can't do that for you. A pill can give you sleep, but it cannot give you rest. God does rest. And his presence is with you. That's something that you have to experience to understand. His presence, this is not a one-time fits all. Sometimes you'll feel his presence stronger than others. But that's something that is part of the hope we have. Verse 15. And he said unto him, if thy presence go not with me, carry us not up hence. I agree. For wherein shall it be known here that I and thy people have found grace in thy sight? Is it not that thou goest with us? So shall we be separated, I and thy people, from all the page not updating, from all the people that are upon the face of the earth. He's saying right here, you've got to go with us. We don't have any choice. We're out in the middle of nowhere now. That's faith. Over and over, you're going to see this same story repeat. They're out in the middle of nothing and they don't know where they are, what they're going to do, how they're going to get. If God doesn't do something, it won't happen. That's faith. Verse 17. And the Lord said unto Moses, I will do this thing also that thou hast spoken, for thou hast found grace in my sight, and I know thee by name. Good stuff. Exodus 34. Exodus 34, verse 7. It says, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, that will by no means clear the guilty. What? God has been forgiving sins. That's what all of those sacrifices were about. On credit. Those were temporary forgiveness time slots that they had to come for. And he says, I'm going to do that, but that's not the complete deal. It has to be finalized with a sacrifice that totally is acceptable to me. And that's only the spotless Lamb, Jesus Christ. The old ones could only hold you for a year. He says, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, upon the children's children, unto the third and fourth generation. Charismatics love this verse. They try to talk of it. They put a non-biblical term on there. They call it generational curses. Do you see where it says generational curses? The word generation is there. There's no curse in there anywhere. They've turned the mercy of God into a curse. He says, I'm not clearing the guilty. What I am doing is I'm going to visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and upon the children's children. Okay, so what he's saying, what happens when God visits? You get a choice. That's mercy. He didn't just destroy. You know what iniquity is? Iniquity is learned sin. It's a public sin that someone else can be taught by your actions. So he says, I'm going to visit for that. These people are mimicking what sins they've seen their fathers do. And I'm going to visit. Why is he visiting? To show them that's wrong. It displeases me. And then they have a choice. Deuteronomy 13, verse 18. Deuteronomy 13, 18. He says, when thou shalt hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep all his commandments, which I command thee this day, to do that which is right in the eyes of the Lord. So to please him, it requires what? Hearken and keep all his commandments. Very different system. Very difficult. Now, people don't really understand the Old Testament. The Old Testament is this. Over and over, you read about perfect people. Job is perfect. Over and over, you find these men that are called perfect. What does he mean by perfect? He means from the time they sinned, they did the sacrifice, and now they're perfect again. That's what it required. So if you broke a commandment, you brought the sin sacrifice for that, and now you were clean again. Perfect. Look at it in Hebrews 4. Hebrews 4, verse 16. A verse that I'm sure we've all used wrong, but that's okay. We make a spiritual application out of this. Doctrinally, it does not apply to the church age, and I'll show you why. Hebrews 4:16. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. I've already got grace. If Jesus doesn't have grace, ain't nobody going to get it. I'm in him. He says right here, the Old Testament system, find grace. Grace already found me. I'm in it. He says, look at, let's see, where was I? 4:6, yes. No, 4:16. Yeah. I think I'm done with that verse. Mm-hmm. Look at it in Ezekiel 4:14. Ezekiel 14. I've got these out of order. So Ezekiel 4:14, and then we'll go somewhere else. Put your finger there and we'll come back. Ezekiel 4:14. And then I think I didn't finish my verse in Deuteronomy 13. Deuteronomy 13:18. He says, when thou shalt hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep all his commandments, which I command thee this day, to do that which is right in the eyes of the Lord thy God. Ooh, so it went a step farther than just doing commandments. You may have done the commandments and still done something that was not right in the eyes of the Lord. So we have to figure out what that is. Ezekiel 14:14. Ezekiel 14:14. 4:14 or 14:14. I think I've said it all. Ezekiel 14:14. Though these three men, now he's going to give you some great men in the Bible. Noah, Daniel, and Job were in it. They should deliver but their own souls by their righteousness, saith the Lord God. So you got to think about these men. What's so special about these men? Well, we're going to find out about Noah in a minute, so we'll come back to him. But he says Daniel. What do we know about Daniel? And Job. What do those guys have in common? Well, obviously, Job has done one thing that is the same, in my opinion, as what Daniel did. And that is intercede for other people who weren't praying for themselves. Job has to pray for his miserable comforters. Mm-hmm. I think I'd be thinking twice about that. Y'all just have a little misery for a while. Come see me in a couple of years. Maybe I'll pray for you. Daniel does the same thing. In Daniel 9, you see him praying for the whole nation and including himself, as we've done this and we've been so bad and we did that and this. Interceding. So that's something that pleases God, and it seems like it's something that has an extra reward to it. It delivers other people, and that's exactly what they were responsible for doing. Look at it in verse 20, Ezekiel 14:20. Though Noah, Daniel, and Job were in it, as I live, saith the Lord God, they shall deliver neither son nor daughter. They shall but deliver their own souls by their righteousness. He said it again. He does not stutter. He knows we have 2 ears, and he's going to fill them both up with the same message so we get it in stereo. These three men are something special. Now notice the phrase in there. Their own souls by their righteousness. Not God's righteousness. Their righteousness. Their acts, their works, those are works of righteousness that they did. We don't do works of righteousness. We are in the one who is righteous, and he performs acts of righteousness through us. All we do is we quit resisting him. That's what we have to do in this age. That's the hard part, is to tell the flesh, no, God wants to do this. Sit down, shut up, and let him do it. That's the hard part. Look at it in Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11, verse 7. He says, by faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear. That is, he had been given some information about something that was going to happen that nobody had ever seen before. That's what we do as Christians. We warn people. There is a hell out there. There's a lake of fire. There's a righteous judge that's going to come to the earth and cut off heads and squash people, and blood's going to squirt out, because that's what he says. Now, that's not been seen yet, not by anybody we're telling, but that's what we're telling them. We're doing it for fear that they don't have. They should be scared to death of that. Prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. That is, he proved that that he was righteous, and he proved his faith by preparing and doing and building the ark and doing what God had required of him. You can't tell me that the Old Testament doesn't have works involved in salvation. Otherwise, why did Noah spend so much time building a boat? 1 Peter 3. 1 Peter 3, verse 20. He says, which sometime were disobedient when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah while the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. A lot of great things in that verse. We got to try to get some of them. He says, the lost world there, that's the disobedient ones, that God was being long-suffering with. He gave them the amount of time it took for Noah to build the ark before he destroyed them. That's long-suffering. And if you look it up, it's 100 years. I make a point of this because I can't tell you how many people have gotten this wrong. They see where God limits the lifespan of the giant in Genesis 6 to 120 years, and they assume that's how long it takes for Noah to build the boat. But if you look at the years given, it's 100 years. So those particular giants that he killed could only live 100 years. They didn't get to live 120. What he means is the giants that come up after that, their life will end by 120 years. Because they're giants after that. Okay, I gave you too much information. Okay, he says, while the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved. It's a big congregation there, isn't it? Noah got him a mega church going. And it's just family members. That's all he got in. But he's the great example all the way through the Bible. God's not so interested in what we consider results as he is in obedience. And if you'll be obedient, then you'll be one of the greats in God's book. Now let's notice the last phrase. 8 souls were saved by water. Really? How many of them got in the water? If they got in the water, they weren't saved, they were killed. That is, the water is what kept them safe from being part of the crowd that God destroys. Different use of the word. 2 Peter 2, verse 5. 2 Peter 2, verse 5. And spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the 8th person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. One day, God's going to eliminate this world of all ungodly. They don't see it. It's coming. We should see it. And that will encourage us to stay godly and stay out of the wicked crowd, because there's going to be unsheathed wrath of God poured out on those that are ungodly. After Noah has diligently sought God, he was told about those things that hadn't been seen yet. The flood's coming. Go get some 2x4s and we're going to put together a boat. It says he moved with fear and prepared an ark to the saving of his soul, his house. So fear is not a bad thing. Fear is a very good thing. A person who has no fear is a very dangerous individual. Matter of fact, that's a description of the devil, made without fear. So fear is a good thing. A Christian, of all people, should be more fearful of God because we actually believe in him. The lost world should be fearful of him, but they're not. This thing about fear, that's a proper motive for serving God. people want to say you should never fear God. Baloney. There's too many phrases in there saying fear God and fear the Lord. I put them up when we were at the old church. I put them up on the at Marcus Point on the bulletin board. There must have been 50 of them, something like that. Yeah. Fear is all the way through the Bible. God's expecting man to fear him. And if a person doesn't, he doesn't really know him. Look at it in Philippians 2. Philippians 2, verse 12. Wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Well, it goes a step farther than fear. It's trembling. I know that we never tremble often enough, but if you think about it hard enough, the trembling will happen. That is, none of us deserve the next breath. He says fear and trembling. Now, I'm going to cover one thing in there that's a difficult passage. He says, work out your own salvation. What in the world do you mean by that? Why would you want your salvation out of you? He means what he put in you, make it come out of you. The holy righteousness of God was put into you. Now, with fear and trembling, let God work it out and make it effective to those on the outside with fear and trembling. Look at it in verse 15, Philippians 2:15. That you may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God, without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. He says a Christian ought to be blameless and harmless and act like the sons of God. Act like you're saved. That's what he's saying. And so that ought to cause some fear and trembling when you realize that we hadn't always done that. And so he says this is what you ought to be as a Christian. This fear thing is the beginning of what's wisdom in the Bible. Therefore, if you're going to exalt the Bible to the position it should be in, we should have wisdom from God. And the first step, the first rung on that ladder is to fear God. So modern Christianity says, do not fear God, simply respect him. Baloney. They're trying to keep you from getting wisdom. Look at it in Job 28. Job 28:28. And unto man he said, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. And to depart from evil is understanding. Okay, the wisdom says, God does not like sin and wickedness. The way he used it in our verse is evil. He destroys evil and evil people. That's fear. And he calls that wisdom. And then he says, to depart from evil, that's understanding. That is, wisdom should even put your feet in a move. So wisdom says, this is what God does with this crowd right here. Understanding says, uh-oh, I don't want to be in that crowd, and runs. Proverbs 1 verse 7. Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Now we saw in Job, where he talked about, seemed like a different order, wisdom and knowledge, or understanding. So here he's saying the two work together, and it's like you can't have one without the other, and one grows the other. When you're taking some vitamins, you're supposed to take another one with it so that it helps the vitamin work or whatever. I don't know, that's probably just a sales pitch, but what he's saying here is similar to that. You need wisdom to get understanding, and you need understanding to get wisdom and knowledge, and all of it grows and it builds. Doesn't mean you can ever drop one or the other. They should always be there and always growing. He says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and, another word, instruction. So we got to have all of those. Obviously, it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. When he comes back and is mad, you don't want to be around. You want to be behind him, not in front of him. And we found that verse in Hebrews 10. That's the previous chapter to this chapter we're reading. Noah's fear is a proper motive for obedience. It's proper for a soul winner to go out soul winning with the idea of fear being something he should use. Jude, verse 22. Now, if you're only interested in scaring people, that's one-sided. If all you want to do is scare somebody, I would say that's more than likely just flesh. Because you want to see a result, and you've decided this tactic works. Jude, verse 22. And some have compassion, making a difference. The Holy Spirit will tell you when to do what. Sometimes you should have compassion, and that'll make a difference. But that ain't always. Verse 23, and others save with fear, pulling them out of the fire, hating even the garment spotted with flesh, spotted by the flesh. So there he says there's two sides of it. Sometimes you need to use compassion. Sometimes you need to be using a fear tactic. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way the Bible does it over and over. I don't think Noah was out there being real compassionate when he condemned the world. I think his message was, it's about to rain and all of y'all are going to get killed. That doesn't sound real nice. Jonah shows up to Nineveh and he doesn't even give them any options for repenting. He says, 40 days and you're going down. I'm going to go sit over here and watch. 40 days and Nineveh shall be destroyed. And the whole town repents. Imagine that. That is, we do whatever God tells us to do at the time and he works out the results of it. All right, we better stop it there. We could go on to Hebrews 8, 11:8. I'll just tell you what it's about. In Hebrews 8, verse 8 to 10, you're going to be confronted with Abraham. And there is a lot to say about Abraham. We'll cover that when we get there.